So, if you've been on YouTube Shorts and watch art videos, you might be aware of the YouTuber by the name of Lust, and if you haven't heard of him, he's mainly an art YouTuber who's been active a lot on YouTube Shorts, and while I was watching his videos, I would run into the hot lady. Now, basically what happened in this video was a viewer asked him to draw a hot lady, and he would go on to do that exact thing. Draw a hot lady. And if I'm going to be honest, I'm kinda surprised that something similar to her never ended up as a Skylander. The concept, not design. And that's when I realized something. I don't think I've ever made a dedicated video to Skylanders from the fire element, and what I mean by that is every Skylander in the video is part of that single element. I've done that for a few elements like earth and water, and I've done that a lot with the life element, but this is a perfect opportunity to do that for the fire element. Smolder Dash pretty much fits the description of a hot lady perfectly. She is a lady, and she is hot. Flames are literally coming out the back of her head, and I decided to do a bit of searching for other Skylanders who fit this description, and I was able to find 3. Perfect. So today we're going to go over these 3 Skylanders and see what we can exactly learn. So without any more stalling, let's get straight into this. And to make things easier, let's start off with the first one I was aware of.
A blaze of glory.
When it comes to 3 Skylanders on today's roster, I think that Smolder Dash is my favorite. I know that in comparison, Ember just looks a little better and her attacks are kinda lackluster in comparison to the other 2, but I think it's because she's the first Skylander I bought after my first video. I also took a look at her concept art, and I think this is the first time that I think that the design we got in-game is a complete downgrade compared to the concept art. Smolder Dash's in-game design isn't that bad, but come on, you gotta admit these concept arts are cool. They just add so much to her look that her in-game model just doesn't do. This one looks more African or Mayan in design, while this one looks more Egyptian, which is my personal favorite. Heck, even the one that looks the closest to her design that just adds these patterns to her body and removes some of her armor looks far better. Imagine what the light core variant would have looked like if they used this design. It looks incredible. But me complaining about her base design aside, let's take a look at her backstory and see what we can learn. Ever since Smolder Dash was a child, she had always wanted to be the royal protector of the first flame, a sacred torch that resided in the fire temple. The reason why the torch is so sacred is because the first flame was lit by the original fire source, and she pretty much would have became its protector if it wasn't for one little problem. Smolder Dash was born during an eclipse, and because of that, most of her people thought that she was cursed, so they wouldn't even let her get near the torch, let alone hold a position with that amount of honor. But many people's perception of her would change after a certain event. When Smolder Dash was older, Chaos would steal the torch from the temple with the intention of using it to light his birthday cake, and out of everyone there, Smolder Dash would be the first to act. Smolder Dash would track him down, and once she found his lair, she would bolt in, fighting off the troll security force before finding and thrashing Chaos before he could blow out the candles, retrieving the torch and returning home as a champion of her people. After she returned, she would be granted the honor of becoming a royal defender, but she would surprisingly decline the offer. After seeing what Chaos could do, she decided that she would instead dedicate herself to protecting Skylands from him. So she would become a Skylander, where she would go on to make an appearance in Trigger Happy Target's Evil Chaos and Stump Smash vs. the Bone Dragon, along with a cameo in Ripped into Overdrive. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of all this, I'd like to bring up that Smolder Dash looks like she's wearing a suit of some sort, which makes me wonder what she actually looks like under it. Yes, we get a glimpse at her face in the concept art, but it's concept art, so it probably isn't canon. Not to mention how detached it is from the other concept arts where she is wearing her mask. And speaking of that, I think her mask is actually her face. I'm pretty sure it moves, and from what I can see, it's in a different position in her light core variant pose. So if that's the case, does that mean the fire coming out of the back of her head is her hair? I mean, it would make sense. The hats don't go on top of her crown, but instead they rest behind it at an angle. And speaking of which, what exactly is her species? I don't think they're ever named once in the story, they're just all referred to as her people, and I couldn't even find anything relating to them anywhere. I even checked her sections in the SWAT Force guidebook and the universe book in the archives, and I even looked at the wiki where I still couldn't find a damn thing. All of this actually makes me wonder what the difference between her and her species is. It would be really cool to actually get to see them in some sort of official form. But the last thing that I would like to talk about is the eclipse. Now, considering the fact that light and dark are elements within Skylands, it's just so fascinating that something like that can occur. It actually makes me wonder what effect, if any, it could potentially have in Skylands and how people think of it. The moon is literally blocking out the sun. I'm sure a good chunk of Skylands would have some sort of feeling about that. But with that said and done, let's take a look at the next Skylander of today.
Fire it up!
Now, out of all the Skylanders I've talked about, I think that Torch is probably the most unassuming Skylander that I have ever encountered, because holy hell, I was not expecting to stumble upon the information that I did. What's crazy about all of this is how basic she looks. This isn't a diss at her at all, her welder look actually makes her a little unique, but still, I wasn't expecting how much lore she has and how interesting it is. So without further ado, let's jump into it. As a child, Torch spent most of her time working with her grandfather, where they would tend to a stable of dragons that protected the village they resided in. But everything would change for her when one day, an evil ice dragon would unleash a terrible blizzard onto the entire village, burying the entire town in a massive glacier. It isn't said how, but Torch was the only one to escape, and she would vow to herself that she would free her people from their chilly fate. Arming herself with her flamethrower, she would fight her way through the treacherous conditions and confront the dragon, the two fighting each other in an epic battle before she eventually defeated it. After the village was unfrozen, she would make her way back home, only to discover that her grandfather was gone, the only thing that he left behind being his lucky horseshoe. And after that event, she would become a Skylander, never giving up the search for her grandfather. Now, the thing that piques my interest about this backstory the most is the fact that Torch's grandfather and her worked at a stable of dragons, and that makes me wonder what kind of dragons they took care of. Was it something similar to the dragons within the Skylanders, or did they take care of larger dragons? And speaking of them, where exactly were they when the ice dragon showed up to attack the village? Their job was to protect it, and the story doesn't even say where they were when the ice dragon came down to attack them. So either the ice dragon caught them off guard, or the dragons couldn't handle a threat like that. Or they just sucked at their job, but hey, I honestly don't know. Another thing that I want to ask is, why does Torch have fire for hair? It's a weird detail that I noticed, but it's never explained at all in her backstory. But this detail has made me speculate if her and Chill's species are one and the same. I know this is out of the blue, no pun intended, but both of them are humanoids and almost look exactly like each other proportion-wise except for the extra details, like Chill's eyes and Torch's skin and fire hair. I'm not saying that they are humans because, well, I kinda doubt that, but what I think is happening is something similar to what we've seen with some of the elves. If we compare this to Stealth Elf, Hex, and Avril, you can see how their environments and circumstances play an effect on their appearances. Stealth Elf looks like the average elf and is tied to the life element. Hex has been warped by the land of the undead, which turned her green skin a pale, almost grayish blue and made her an elf of the undead element. And when it comes to Avril, her eyes are completely normal, well, in the context of the other races, and her skin is blue, which may suggest that she and the other frost elves are part of the water element, since things like ice and snow align with said element. What's to say that the same thing didn't happen with Chill and Torch's races? Yeah, I know that doesn't explain the fire hair thing, but maybe it's just how her people are affected by that element. Now, I'm not trying to say that all humanoid-looking Skylanders are the same race, because I'm sure that a lot of them are separate, but this is just something that I wanted to point out with these two specifically because of how similar they look. But with that out the way, let's get into the last Skylander of today.
Fan the flame!
Now, when it comes to Ember, I think that she has the best design out of the three. Yeah, I know that Smolder Dash was the first and stands out the most, but every part of Ember's design just works so well for me. Her color scheme is awesome, the samurai look works flawlessly and doesn't look over the top, even when you account for the golden fire symbol bolted at the top of it. The flames that make up her lower body look like the legs of a genie, and even the ninja stars at the end of these leather things that I don't know the name of don't clash with anything and instead just make her design look better than it would without it. The only real issue I have with her is the fact that she's only playable in a Skylanders game that I don't own. So with that out the way, let's take a look at her backstory and see what we can learn. Ember hails from a long race of sentinels who were skilled in the art of dual blades, and because of this, she would be raised within the dojo where the art was taught. It was her father's dream to see her follow in their family's tradition of taking over the training facility, so she would train day in and day out to master the blade, which she was naturally gifted in, and soon enough, she would soar higher than the other dual blade masters around her. But word of the dojo and its arts would eventually reach Chaos. When Chaos heard about this, he would immediately take over her village and ban martial arts entirely out of fears of an uprising. But Ember would fight back against his rule. She would unleash an impressive barrage of samurai pyrotechnics upon the invaders and would force them to flee. And even though her village was free, she knew that there was a greater evil out there. So she would leave her village behind and join the Skylanders to train others in the art of the Sentinel battle class. But she still plans to one day return to her homeland and reopen her family's dojo. But she will only do so when Skylands is safe, once and for all. Now, when it comes to this backstory, I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me is why her village was taken over by Chaos and his forces. The way it's described makes me think that this happened during Chaos's reign over Skylands between Trap Team and Superchargers. The reason I think this is because, once again, how it's described. If he just saw them as a threat, it would have just said that, but it said that he was afraid of an uprising. And plus, if we really think about it, there's really no reason for Chaos to take over this village. From what I understand, there's nothing really there to take, and when Chaos does something, there's usually a purpose behind it, like a special resource or something that he can use. But him banning the martial art makes me think that he was just ruling this area and the village happened to be there. But with that said and done, I think this is where this video is going to come to a close. So like always, thank you for watching. Like always, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy videos like this, share this around so I can grow as a channel, leave some comments down below to make the algorithm happy, and I will see you all in the next one.